Hey, we're at San Diego Comic-Con 2023 with Michael Kelly, the VP of Global Publishing with Hasbro. First things first, I know some of the stuff that you guys are publishing, but I'm sure there are things I don't know about. So let's first talk about that, exactly what your initiatives are and everything out there that people might not know about that's not toys.
Sure, that's a lot. So I'll try and be as brief as I can. But we actually, believe it or not, Hasbro Publishing puts out about 1,000 new books every year. So it's quite a bit. That makes us about the same size as a mid-sized publisher. So doing quite a lot of work. But we do everything from comics, which you're obviously aware of. We've got Power Rangers with Boom Studios along with Magic the Gathering. IDW's doing our Dungeons & Dragons and My Little Pony comics. And of course now we've got Skybound with our G.I. Joe and Transformers. So a lot going on in the comic book world, to be sure. But we also do books for all ages. So whether it's art collectible books that we do with people like Viz Media, Insight Editions, 10 Speed Press. We do a lot of children's books as well. So, storybooks, 8x8s, coloring and activity, you name it. So whether you're 5 or 55, there's something that you can read that's Hasbro branded, and, we're all about telling stories.
So the interesting for me is, Hasbro, there's a lot of synergy. There's a lot of tie-ins with toys and movies and television. And how's it work with the actual books? I mean, I know it takes quite a while to publish comics or books in general. Take quite a while to come up with the actual figures. But, what's the kind of coordination between Hasbro and the actual publishers?
So we act on an out-licensing basis, so we would have a contracted publisher that's working with us depending on whatever the brand is. The way that we work it is that my team, if you will, acts as a editorial and artistic consultant. So we will review concepts, we'll review manuscripts and artwork that comes in, and we'll tweak it as we need to, whether for storytelling or to keep things on brand and on character. And then, of course, we ourselves work very closely with our franchise team. So all of our brands have a team that sort of is overseeing things to make sure that there's, to your point, synergy between toys, games, movies, TV, you name it. So we're just, it's a collaborative effort.
So the interesting thing to me about Hasbro is Hasbro really, I would say, blew up big in the 80s. I mean, that's when a lot of the properties launched and what most people know about. As far as the toys, games obviously have been around for quite a while. So you've got this interesting balance of kids today getting into these properties, but you also have their parents, most likely, or just generally people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s at this point. How is it to balance those two things? I mean, there was interesting that I got a package from you all, and I got one of the early reader books, which I didn't even know you were publishing, and my daughter loved, and we've read multiple times. But at the same time, you've got stuff like the Skybound stuff, which feels like it might be a more kind of all ages, everybody. You've got maybe a little bit more retro stuff in art books or something like that. So, how do you all balance that and think about that as a company?
Well, this is actually Hasbro's 100th anniversary this year, so there's multiple generations that we're working with. So, we're keenly aware of the fact that it's not just kids and their parents; it's actually their parents as well. And so we've got multi-generations that have engaged with Hasbro toys and games over the years. So the way we look at it really is that it's always an interesting balance of ensuring that we're putting out stories and books that really are satisfying to those people who have been fans for a long time and have certain expectations from their own childhood, but at the same time coming up with new creative ways to target those younger kids and make sure that they also have their first experience with whether it's G.I. Joe, Pony, or Transformers. So it's a challenge, to be sure, and I think it's important to make sure that people are aware that we're trying to fit multiple audiences. So you might have somebody who's like, "Oh, I didn't realize you had I don't want to read this, level 2 reader."
My next question. Yeah, kind of go along with that. I mean, it's got to be difficult in that you've got, well, call the old guard who might be a bit more dug into the ways of what they like. The G1, we'll say maybe the G1 Transformers fans. But obviously, the Skybound seems to be going in a slightly different direction from G1, or you had the IDW that was really building upon that world. That you're gonna anger potentially some of those people. I mean, it's got to be a very difficult balance to do that.
It can be, but I think at the end of the day, the brands are so strong, and I think what we try to always convey is our deep respect and love for the brands themselves, right? And we hope that that shines through regardless. So what I always say is, if somebody's unhappy with something because it's not exactly what they expected or what they want from the brand, then my message to them is always just, there is something for you. This might not be, and that's okay. But again, I encourage them to think about, their own kids or their nieces and nephews or whatever child might be in their life and say, wouldn't you like them to have the same experience that you did back in 1982 or 1984? And that's what we're trying to do. So, I think it's a really great way to be able to capture those different audiences and making sure that there is something so that those older fans can pass it on to their next generation.
So, obviously with the different generations, kind of sticking on that, they're consuming things differently. How are you thinking about that as a publisher? I mean, obviously, digital is, I don't know, growing or out there. Like no one, I think, quite has a handle on or knows exactly what's going on. You obviously have the comic market, which is unto itself. Book market is an interesting business. But again, there's got to be that balance that you all are doing. I mean, what are you kind of finding or discovering that? I mean, do you have to approach different audiences differently with what you're publishing?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the exciting things about publishing is that it's constantly evolving. I think people tend to look at it from the outside as like, oh wow, books, that's pretty old school. But we continue to evolve along with all the other technology as well. And I think from my perspective, it's making sure that we are where people are and where they're reading. So we're doing a lot with audio storytelling right now. There's a huge growth in audio, as you're aware, and we try to do that through, again, different platforms. So whether it's our Dungeons and Dragons novels that are available on Audible, or it's we have My Little Pony and Peppa Pig stories that are available on Yodo Player, and the others, Tony Box. So just making sure, again, that we're aware of what's developing and what's coming, and that we're on the forefront of that.
So we're in month, I would say, 2 of the Energon Universe. For Hasbro, like what's exciting about basically starting from scratch with the Transformers comics? I mean, there's that. Rise of the Beast 2 as well, I think, is kind of a new direction for things. There's a lot more crossover between properties, it seems to be hinted at, for both of those. I mean, is that a purposeful thing between that? Like, is that something you can talk about at all? Like that, to me, that's the interesting aspect. Is you had Rise of the Beast, the surprise ending of the G.I. Joe, and then the Energon Universe does the, hey, we're not doing Transformers, we're also doing G.I. Joe, and it's just like, okay, is this planned? Is this not planned? Is this like all tied in? Like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that there's some big master plan driving things at the moment, but what I would say is that there's a long history of our comic books crossing over, right? I mean, you go all the way back to Marvel. We did our first Transformers G.I. Joe crossover. IDW did one. DDP did one. So it's a rite of passage, if you will, to make sure that they both fit in together. And I think there's just a natural synergy between those brands. It's not like you have to really suspend your disbelief too much to say like, oh well, of course G.I. Joe lives in the same universe that Transformers do. I'd take it one step further. We have an issue of a comic out there where Rock and Roll's wearing a Gem and the Holograms t-shirt, so he went to the show, But I think the important thing is to make sure that you're not forcing something, that you're telling. You're always focused on good storytelling and letting that drive the decision making. So whether that's in films or comics, it doesn't matter as much whether we're have some big master plan. What matters is that we're telling good stories.
For the Skybound, I mean, we haven't actually seen the G.I. Joe Transformers. We just have Void Rivals right now, which the second issue dropped. You got the Skuxoid, which kind of, I was like, whoa, okay, you guys are digging deep into the history. How much is that them and how much is that Hasbro? I mean, to me, that was a really cool reveal where I'm just like, all right, it's not just robots you're digging into for Transformers. You're really going into the alien aspect of it. Really, where's this being generated from, I guess, is the big question.
So it is, again, a really collaborative effort, right? So I think one of the most important things when you're working in this business and being a licensor of big properties like Transformers and Joe is if you're going to go out there and hire great talent to do your books, like Robert Kirkman or, you name it, Larry Hama, whoever it is that your writer is, then, it doesn't make sense to do that unless you're going to listen to their ideas, right? So I've never been really I don't dictate. There are a few things that are brand tenets that have to happen that can't be violated. But aside from that, I want to see their creativity. I want to see their ideas come to life, because that's how you keep things fresh and interesting.
You brought up Larry Hama. He's continuing with Skybound, which I think was a bit surprising, but also it was just a celebration. I mean, the man is G.I. Joe. How does it feel to have someone that you've collaborated with for 300 issues? I mean, it's got to be more than that, because I mean, he's probably done more than just the main series. But I mean, that's not a common thing nowadays. So.
No, in fact, I think, and don't quote me exactly on this, but I'm pretty sure that Larry Hama's run on Real American Hero is somewhere in the top 5 longest running single number. Yeah. So, I mean, it's impressive, and we had him in the booth doing a signing yesterday, and what I love about Larry is that he's just quietly passionate about this brand, and I love that dedication. And I've said it before, but I believe this deeply, that as long as he wants to write G.I. Joe, and as long as I'm running publishing, he's going to have a place to write G.I. Joe. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's for someone who was reading G.I. Joe comics in the beginning. I mean, that's great to hear. To me, he is G.I. Joe. Is there anything coming up, or that's you really excited? I mean, there's so many different things going on with publishing now. I mean, it's really not Wild West, but it kind of like a exciting time with lots of new tech and different ways to consume and all that. Is there something that's really standing out to you that's exciting to either dip your toes into, or that you are doing as an initiative?
I mean, there's not much I can say definitively at the moment, but I would say that if you're reading about technology, the likelihood is that we're probably already exploring it and figuring out how that fits in with our work. But again, I think it's really, what's fascinating to me is, again, how do you get people into immersive storytelling? It's like I love reading, and I love that when people do read books. I think it's great. But what's the next iteration of that? What's the opportunity where somebody is not just reading the book but experiencing the book? So I think that's it.
I appreciate you chatting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.